What's up, guys? This is JZNES back again with another video. Today we're talking about Final Fantasy VII, the sequel to Final Fantasy VI, and you're probably wondering why Final Fantasy III is sitting up there. Of course, many of you know that that is Final Fantasy VI. I don't actually have a physical copy of Final Fantasy VII, so fuck me. I guess I'm just not a very good, I'm not a real true collector or whatever. My brother's got a copy, but that's at my mom's place, so nope, not happening. Anyway, no copy. Played it on the PlayStation Network version, which I've had for, God, fucking, like, 10 years or some shit, probably. Like, a long time, and I've wanted to play it. I did play a little bit back then. Didn't get very far. I didn't get much past, so there's a part where you go to the Shinra building or whatever, and then you like you're on the motorcycle and whatever. It was like right past that is as far as I got. So I definitely surpassed that within like the first day or so of playing this game this time around. Yeah. So Final Fantasy VII, right? Like widely touted as like one of the greatest games of all time, one of the greatest PS1 games, this and that, and blah blah. It's got all these acclaimed, all this acclaim to it, right? It's better than Metal Gear Solid. It's better than every game ever. Blah blah blah. It's the best PS1 game. This and that. But you know, going into it with a fresh mindset, and you got to understand that I'm here with a fresh mindset. I've played through these games, all the games up until this point, other than 5. Sorry, 5. Up until this point, I've played through all of the games. It's been years and years since I've been making my way through these games. But I'm here, you know, this is the whole reason I wanted to make my way through these games, was to get to 7. So you gotta understand my perspective here, you know, I like RPGs. I'm an RPG player. That's what I do, you know, that's one of my favorite genres is RPGs. The Dragon Quest series is one of my favorite series of games. And I think that series is much more consistent and much better than the Final Fantasy series. But not to say Final Fantasy doesn't have its gems, like Final Fantasy VI, for instance, which is, I don't want to spoil anything, but I'll say it's made its way into my top 100 games list, whereas none of the other Final Fantasies, minus a spin-off game, made it into that list. Whereas many Dragon Quest games made it into that list. Less than I kind of had anticipated were going to make it into that list, but, you know, that's for another time. Get me a few more subscribers and we'll talk that shop for a few hours or however long the fuck that's going to take. But anyway, so this is my fresh experience playing this game. You know, like, I played those first few hours of it back then, and so that was a thing, but I never really got too invested in it back then. I never really gave it a fair shot. I was playing it on the PSP, so it's like, his screen is like tiny as shit. And I do remember that, and I do remember a lot of stuff happening there, but I think this game is much better experienced on a big TV. You kind of have to experience it that way for your first time. You can't play it on the PSP or whatever. The only reason I did that was because of portability, and at the time that was kind of important to me and whatnot. And, but, yeah, so I mean, it just, what I'm trying to say is that this time I played it kind of in a more optimal way. Not the most optimal way now. The most optimal way probably would have been playing one of the ports where the pre-rendered backgrounds, and maybe not the back. I don't think it's the backgrounds. I think it's just the characters and like their little character icons or whatever are more HD and stuff like that. And that's all the playthroughs online that I've seen was just like these more high-res versions of the same thing that I played, you know, and that's not a bad thing at all. Let's start with some positives. All right, here's what I did like about the game. I liked the graphics. The graphics kind of blew me away, honestly, in a sense. I like, oh wow, blew me away, but like, it's pretty impressive for PS1, these graphics. Like, the pre-rendered backgrounds on the game, and just the camera angles and stuff made for such a like a cinematic kind of looking game. It was almost like the Resident Evil one style, or just the Resident Evil games style, you know, where you have these like nice angles, but like almost to another level, because they would make your sprite so small, and then you'd like look up at this big thing, and it's like you'd be just this little guy like down here running around it, and it's like it's so cinematic to look up at this thing. And you know, there's this whole debate I've had. I think I had this debate years ago with one of my friends or something, but like whether or not Final Fantasy VII looks better than Metal Gear Solid, and it's like, in a way, yeah, it kind of does. Like the character models are like so. They don't really hold up quite as well. The overworld ones, anyway, they look fine. They look pretty good for their time. They're very passable. And I know they've definitely improved on that in later Final Fantasy games for the PlayStation. But yeah, so like, but the battles like themselves. Okay, so like let's talk about that. So the animation on the battles, the animation alone is just like so good. The summons and stuff, that like reminds me of something straight out of Golden Sun. I know Golden Sun kind of took it from here, but like, holy shit, some of those summons are like badass, and like all the boss moves and stuff. Like, okay, well, I'll talk about something here in a second that I didn't like about that, because I just want to add this in here with the graphics. But a lot of the animations and the characters' moves and stuff, and just the way they would run around in battle and stuff. Not run around, but you know, like go towards the enemy, and all the animation was like super well done. So I guess that's a whole nother category from the graphics. So the graphics looked great. You know, you know, I didn't have it like the highest resolution or anything. You know, with some of those other ports, like I said, that would have maybe made things look a little nicer. But like, it's really impressive for the time, like all of the detail that they put into this world, in appearance wise, you know. And then what I was trying to say is the character models in battle of your characters look like really good for PS1. They're like pretty detailed, and they're even better when they're high res. Like they look really nice, like in battle. Yeah, on the overworld, they kind of look so, like I said. But and all the enemies look pretty good. At first I kind of thought like, yeah, I still think I definitely prefer the Final Fantasy VI kind of art style, you know, the sprites and whatnot. But that's just me, you know. But for its time, this is a very impressive looking game, you know, and I get that. And I understand that probably blew people's minds back then, kind of, you know, which I get. It was like, that's cool, man. Like, I get that experience must have been really cool back then to experience that, but I didn't experience that. So, but the graphics, they're great. The I like the animations and stuff I was talking about, that kind of ties into the graphics. That's all great and stuff. One thing I will mention about that, by the way, there's going to be spoilers? Question mark. There's not really a lot to spoil, but I'm going to spoil a few little things anyway, so like whatever. So the one thing that kind of pissed me off though was like, I'll just add this in there and I'll get back to the good stuff here in a second, but I just don't want to forget this, because this is some bullshit right here. There's, in the final battle with Sephiroth, which is a great, epic battle, by the way. I'm going to talk about that here in a second, because that's really good. His gameplay is great, but, like, in this battle, there's a 2-minute unskippable scene of a move that he does where he destroys the entire solar system, and somehow your characters withstand the same blast that destroyed, like, our actual solar system, like Pluto and Jupiter and all this stuff. It's one by one. You have to watch these things get destroyed every time. And I mean every time he does the move. It's not like they're just one gets destroyed every time. No. Literally, they keep getting destroyed every time. And then somehow they're miraculously back by the next time he does the move again. It's like, what the fuck? And it's 2 minutes of like this unskippable fucking animation. And it's just the oldest thing by the time you've seen it for like the 6th time. Because he does it every few turns or whatever. So just saying. That's like my one little caveat there to that. The graphics are great or whatever. Or the animation. That's like my one animation thing I wish they would have kind of cut down on a little bit. But like, yeah, like all the bosses, especially the final bosses, looked really cool. I guess I'm going to say one negative thing about... I mean, there's other negative things to say about the gameplay, but I'll just say this. The lead up to the final boss, so there's no save point within this whole dungeon, and you get one save point that you get to place somewhere, just one, and you can't, as far as I know, place it right before the final boss. You have to place it in a room that's right before a few rooms where you jump on these things, and the encounter rate there is ridiculous. And every time you run into an encounter there, they're basically boss battles before the 4 final bosses. There's 3 final bosses, sorry. 3 forms of the final boss. Well, technically there's 4, but that doesn't really count. Anyway, so I died more on those leading up to it. I just had to get like a good run going with those to even get to the final boss. The final bosses were hard in a sense, but they weren't as hard as those enemies leading up to the final boss, which I just thought was kind of funny. I didn't think it was funny like 2 hours ago. I thought it was fucking terrible 2 hours ago because I just kept dying to these things. There's this like giant dragon that has this move called Pandora's Box, and you know, I'm only like level 60 at the end of the game with Cloud, and the other 2 are like 58 and 55. Who are Tifa and Yuffie, are the 2 who I've used ever since I got Yuffie from the beginning. I used Tifa the whole way as well. But like shit, like I'm like, you know, I don't know if that's like super high level. I'm sure people like just grinded to 99 and made it super easy or whatever. But like my max HP gets demolished by like these moves, or I just barely hang on with some of the Sephiroth like really big moves like that solar system thing or whatever. Like it was intense, and I like that well enough, but those fucking enemies that lead up to the final boss and that little stretch there were the most annoying part of the whole fucking game for me, because I kept dying. So there's like this dragon, right? He casts Pandora's Box, like I said. It basically kills at least 2 of your party members, if not all of your party members. If you're not at full health, you're dead. You know, that's not happening. I didn't get all the ultimate weapons or do any of that stuff. I was just trying to get through the game, kind of thing. So I did kind of make it harder on myself by the end. There was actually one point where I kind of had to grind out this one materia because I needed it for it was actually the barrier materia. I needed it to beat this this giant like demon wall that's in this like in the Temple of the Ancients or whatever. There's like a giant demon wall, which is kind of like a callback to Final Fantasy IV, I think. But basically, I just got wrecked without, like, you know, like grinding. I literally went up like 9 levels there with Eris and Yuffie. I'm going to call her Eris, by the way, because that's what the game called her, and that's what I like to call her. So you can fuck off in the comments with your Aerith or whatever, you know, like, I just think that's stupid. I'm going to call her Eris. I'm sorry. I know that's probably going to fucking annoy like a million people here, but it's going to happen, so shut up. So I grinded with Eris and Tifa and Cloud to get them up a bunch of levels. And Yuffie was actually kind of behind. That's why she was level 55 at the end of the game versus like level 60 or whatever, because I grew like 9 levels in doing that grind fest around then, because I had to get the barrier spell up to kind of get some of those things so I could block out some magic attacks and whatnot, which is a really helpful spell, by the way. Definitely, as soon as you get that, level that up, because you're going to need that for the final boss. Also, don't forget to bring D barrier to the final boss, or whatever the thing is. It's this destruct is what it is, and level it up at least so you get D barrier, because then you can undo the barriers of the enemies, which was part of the reason I was having such trouble on some of those enemies before the final boss. But anyway, so there's that Pandora's Box guy, and then there's this Knight guy. He's the actual annoying one, was the Knight guy, because he gets like 1,000,000 attacks that he can do like every fucking turn. And if you don't have wall up, you're just kind of dead at that point. We're just fucked, you know. It's just like the guy is just so strong. So while we're talking about that, let's just get into that also, because I have another point I want to make with that. So that was really annoying, that whole little stretch up to the final boss. I like the final bosses. They were great. They were fantastic. Sephiroth is, you know, like, in all of his forms is some of the best gameplay the game had to offer, and it was really intense and tough, and it was an endurance round, and I loved that. You know, I thought it was just really well done. It was so fantastic. All the moves were cool. You know, everything was devastating. You know, you had to have everything up. You had to have your wall up. You had to have fucking regen, so your characters would get health every turn. You had to keep healing at any point, you know, like man, it was just so epic, and just like how it was all playing out was really epic. I don't want to like spoil all that, but everything there was epic except for that little animation thing. It took like 2 minutes every time it fucking happened. But other than that, really cool final boss fight. So amazing. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about was the materia system. So now, the materia system is this thing that's kind of the culmination of the previous game, Final Fantasy VI's, like, move system, or whatever that was called in that game, where you kind of, anybody can basically learn anything. In this game, though, you've only got so many slots, because they're materia slots, and you kind of get more of those whenever you get better equipment and whatnot. And some good equipment has less materia slots to kind of balance out. So it's sometimes the question of, do you want the better equipment that has the better stats, or do you want your more materia and just have like a lesser stat kind of thing? And a lot of the time that was kind of the way I went, was the ones with the better things, the better immunities and whatnot, that kind of thing. So like I had like a fire ring on Yuffie, I think, for like the whole fucking game, because it just like then fire damage was just null and void, and bunch of other shit like that. So that was pretty cool. She had most of those. I gave the ribbon to Tifa. I think you can get more than one ribbon, but I never found the other one, so I didn't really go out of my way to get like everything in the game or whatever, but I did my best to follow the guide and get some of the more important things, you know, so that was just kind of my, you know, my experience with that. But anyway, so the materia system is like a pretty well refined system of the Final Fantasy VI system, except the one thing I don't like about it, basically what you do is you can like put your materia into these little slots, right? And then there's so sometimes there's these little other ones that like are kind of, they add to it. So like, let's say there's you have a cure spell, right? It's like restore is the thing, and then you learn the 3 cure spells by just leveling it up or whatever. And you actually level up the materia this time rather than leveling up the summon, or the Esper, that's what it was, the Esper from the last game with that character. So every character would have to level up that Esper if they wanted to learn those moves. And so that becomes tedious. There's a lot of grinding there. Not a lot of grinding with the materia system, but I didn't necessarily have to grind like at all, except for that one part. It was the only time I ever did any grinding, and that was good for the rest of the game. And that was like way late into like the first disc of the game, which, like, don't be intimidated by the 3 discs, by the way. Like, the first disc is like 70% of the game, and then the other 2 discs, like the last disc is literally the final dungeon, and then the disc before that is like, you know, maybe like the other 25% of the game or whatever. So that's kind of cool. But so don't be intimidated by that. You think like, I don't know how they fit all the stuff that they fit on the first disc on the first disc. I thought that was really impressive. Like, I was expecting it to end like a million times, but of course it ends with something that we'll talk about in a bit here. But so yeah, let's see, what was I talking about? So the materia system is a more well-refined version of this system of the Espers from Final Fantasy VI. So I give the materia system props for that. The one complaint I have about the materia system is the little qualifiers, the little add-on things that you have to put on there, because there's always so many of them that you can find. So if I want to put all, which is a thing that would do, so like, let's say restore, right? You restore all characters, whatever amount you would be restoring. So like if you use Cure 3, you're restoring them a lot, you know, like thousands at that point. But in the other games, Cure 3 was just a spell that healed your whole party anyway, and you didn't have to have an extra materia on there for it. Now, this wouldn't be a big deal if I could, maybe I could, I don't know, maybe I missed it, if I could buy more all materias and then just have to like pick and choose and kind of, you know, really work with my system, because you have to actually have equipment that has little materias that are linked. The little 2 slots for them have to be linked for the all to make the effect on the healing thing anyway. So that would have been cool. Like, that's fine. Like, that's good that they put that in there. I'm all for that. but the all materias are so rare that I didn't have enough to put them on everything. You know, I ended up at the end of the game having to put them on my barrier because that was, you know, that needed to happen. But also, I think all I had was enough for just the barriers, and then just the barriers, and then just the barriers, and then the cure spells on each of my characters. So like that's not a lot. I had like 4 of these, right? So that's it. The three cures and then the barrier, and that's all or whatever. So that kind of sucks. You know, that's like I just wish I had more of those so I could pick and choose and put like, or maybe I would want more barrier spells too, but you know that might break things a little bit. That might be too easy at that point. I'm glad I only kind of had one of those just to kind of, it was more challenging that way, which I kind of appreciated more so. But if I would have had more alls, I could have used. Here's the problem then. Is where what we're getting at. Here is my attacks. For the most part, like 99% of the time, fire, lightning, all that stuff, all the attacks can only hit one enemy, which is really annoying because there's a lot of enemies where you need to hit multiple parts of them, or you need to hit multiple enemies at the same time, and that's kind of where the summons come in. But the summons take like a lot of MP. So it's kind of shitty in that regard. But then there's actually a spell that's the 1%, the 99 versus the 1%. There's a spell called Comet, or maybe it's just Comet 2, I don't know. But it hits everyone. And there's a few spells like that. It's just like, why is there some spells that this happens with and some spells not? Like, just give it to me when I get to the 3rd stage of whatever the materia is. Because, you know, at that point, I'll have earned it. You know, that's fine. I like that. But, like, don't just gate block me to where, like, I can only use so many of these all things to, like... It just doesn't make any sense to me. It makes sense. I know kind of why they did that. But also, it would have been better, I think, had they done it the other way. That's all I'm saying. So, that's my little gripe with the materia system. Other than that, it's a very good improvement on the Esper system because... the materials themselves level up, so you can just give them to whatever character. Let's say I'm not using, which happened a lot, I wasn't using a lot of my characters in my party, like Barrett and, you know, some of them, or whatever. And so, whenever I would have to switch over to them, I'd have to give them materia, and it was no problem. I didn't have to level up or anything. I already had the materia ready for them from my other characters that weren't necessarily in that scene, because they kind of shuffle you to use all of the characters in certain times, in certain places and whatever, given based on the story or who's available or whatnot, you know, who's even at this place and that kind of thing, or who it's important to be fighting and stuff. So yeah, so like that's cool, and I like that, but also, and I like what I like about that, what I'm saying is that the materials that I've already grinded out with my other characters that I've been working on this whole time can just kind of transfer over to my other characters, and that's perfect. Then they don't have to be necessarily the most high level. It kind of gets annoying because they're still lower levels, and they still have lower HP and whatnot. You can kind of mitigate that through the HP plus materia, so that's nice. But it's just like, you know, it's my fault for not like using all the characters like a little bit at a time. I just kind of had my main party, and I just kind of like to stick with them because I obviously knew, and again, spoilers, but it's not a spoiler because it's literally the most well-known spoiler on the fucking internet. When I knew not to, you know, build up Eris because she obviously dies or whatever at the end of the first disc. So there you go. That's your spoiler there for when she dies. I won't tell you how or what, but you've probably already seen how that works. So I guess, yeah, so I like the materia system. I liked the battles system. Like, the battles were fun. Like, I liked them. They weren't always necessarily the most in-depth thing, but definitely later in the game they became a little bit more, you know, like, you really have to try, like, a lot to get through them. It's standard RPG fare, but it was done well enough, and I really did enjoy the gameplay of the game. Was all pretty good, other than the few nitpicks that I had there. You know, like, gameplay's all really pretty good. Gameplay-wise, I guess, there were some, like, random little, like, mini-games or scenes and this and that where you had to do some random stuff that didn't always work out the best. When you're like kind of traveling around. Oh, by the way, you have to use the D-pad the whole time. There's no analog at this point, which is a little annoying. I got used to it eventually, but like, you know, the game's built around it, so it's not a big deal. But I'm just saying, like, the D-pad is interesting to use versus the analog, because there's certain times where I'm trying to like go on a path that's like at a diagonal, and I'm just picturing this one path in maybe you know the one in the ancient city or whatever that is, where you're trying to go to where the save point is, and it's like I can't, like, I keep trying to like go up at an angle to get to there, but it's like it just doesn't really work out for me most of the time. So there's that was kind of annoying, but that's just minor things, just a little here and there. Like mini game wise, like there's just some like really random things. Like there's this marching scene that I failed like a bazillion times because I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. Like I read the thing, I understood like what I was supposed to do, but like it wasn't like very clear how I was supposed to do it. I figured it out eventually. I think I just watched a video about it or something, but stuff like that. Just like little scenes like that. But then again, there were cool scenes. Like there's a scene where you're trying to track down a submarine, and you're in this other submarine, and you're like going around. It's like almost like a different game, but it's like Star Fox or something. Like you're kind of going around this like big open area trying to find this other submarine and like shoot it down and stuff. And I'm like, this is pretty cool for, you know, that kind of controlled a little odd, but you know, like sometimes things controlled a little odd, but it's still a cool scene to kind of throw in there. I mean, like, Final Fantasy VI didn't really have a lot of stuff like that, where you kind of, like, had to learn a whole new gameplay thing, like, you know, for 5 seconds when you're doing this, like, one little thing, like, so that's a blessing and a curse, I would say, on this game. There were some good ones, and there were some, like, stupid ones, like the marching thing, like, it was dumb. I don't know. So, there's that, I guess. I can't really think of all of those that like, happened, but I know a few of those kind of annoyed me, I remember. But, so, fuck, what else was I gonna say? Got my kitty here, he's funny. So yeah, gameplay wise, pretty good. I really enjoyed the gameplay. I lost my train of thought though on the other thing. Summons were cool. I don't know. Anyway, let's just go on to the next thing that I think is really good. And that would be the music. So the music is really fitting and it's well done. I don't necessarily like it as much as Final Fantasy VI's soundtrack, but I still think it's still a really good kind of soundtrack. The thing is, it's more like, you know, industrial and whatnot than like fucking like the more fantasy aspects of some other kind of RPG soundtracks, which I kind of tend to prefer, like the orchestral, really, that kind of stuff. This is more like rockin' and whatnot, you know, and like the battle theme is like super, you know, rock versus Final Fantasy VI's battle theme, which felt really, it was rockin', sure, but it was epic in a sense, you know. You really still felt like you were playing like a Final Fantasy, like a fantasy kind of game, you know, like that kind of thing. But the music is good. Comparatively, though, it just doesn't hold the same emotional weight as Final Fantasy VI has. But you know, the closest it would come to that would be like the Aerith theme. God, I said it. Damn it! No, the Aerith theme. The Aerith theme, of course, you know, that kind of plays throughout the game, and then when she dies and all that. Which is a pretty good theme. I really enjoy it. That's probably one of my favorite tracks in the game, outside of another one, which we'll get to in a bit here. I'll segue into that in a bit. But anyway, so yeah, good music overall. Actually, you know what? We'll see. What do you guys think? Take a guess right now. Place it in the comments. What do you guys think is the best music in the whole game? It could be the Aerith theme. I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying. Hold on. I'll play it for you when I find it here. But the music is good. I really enjoyed it. It's probably like obviously the second best Final Fantasy soundtrack I've heard so far. Actually, I do like the 4 one a lot, if I remember correctly. But, yeah, so, let's see. Still scrolling along. I'm not seeing it. You know what, I'm just going to look it up. So yeah. But, music's really good. Alright, so, take your guesses now about what the best song in the game is, because I'm about to play it. Ready? And here it is. Bum, 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 bum. It's the fucking Chocobo theme. It's fucking rockin' as shit, motherfucker. I love the Chocobo theme. It is incredible in this game. This is the best Chocobo theme by far. And it's not even the Chocobo theme that's like during the races and stuff. It's like the Chocobo theme that plays at this one random like cellar. He just plays, this is when the Chocobo theme plays for some odd reason. And I don't understand this at all, but like it's so random, and he's just like running around having the grandest of times, you know, and I'm just like, what the fuck is going on here? Kind of thing. But anyway, I love that Chocobo theme. Okay, I'll get back to it. I was gonna make a joke about how that was the best song in the game, kind of thing, but so there you go. That's my favorite song of the whole game. Not for lack of, you know, the era theme being pretty good and whatnot, and the battle themes. The battle themes are really good too, and you know, I do really enjoy the final boss theme. Although I thought the one before the final boss was the best one, so I don't think that's the one that everyone like really loves or whatever. But so I might be wrong there on in terms of you know, everyone's nostalgia or whatever. They like the very final boss theme, I think, is the one that's the really popular one or whatever. But I you know, I like that one too. But I'm just saying, like that one is more epic. You know, that definitely feels like if I'm thinking of the right one, that one definitely feels like a final boss theme. You know what I mean? Like, it's hard to compete with some of the other final boss themes that have ever come out of, like, I don't know, the Dragon Quest series, and this series even, you know, Final Fantasy VI's final boss theme is pretty cool. So, yeah. But, so the music's really good, and the graphics and the gameplay, they're all, you know, pretty good. I would say even like, really good. All that stuff is good. Like, cool, right? Like, we've got a good game on our hands. But when it comes down to it, my biggest problem with Final Fantasy VII is that I didn't, and I know this is gonna like fucking rock people's worlds or whatever. They're gonna fucking have an aneurysm when I say this, but I didn't care about the story or the characters. I wanted to care about the story and the characters. I thought, surely, if everyone is saying that this is the best Final Fantasy game, that they're going to have, like, really good story and really good characters, because Final Fantasy VI had really good story and really good characters. And there were really emotional moments in Final Fantasy VI, especially with the characters. Like, man, I had so many favorite characters in that game. You know, like Celeste and Terra and Locke and all those characters. They're super good. And I loved all their little backstories and whatnot. In this game, the backstories are bland, and they don't really do anything to endear you to the characters. I don't really care about the world like I did in Final Fantasy VI. I didn't really think I cared about the world in Final Fantasy VI until, well, I'm gonna do a little spoiler for that too. But until Kefka kind of like took it over and like ruined the whole place, and you get to see the effects of that the whole way through, and it's like, holy shit, in the second half of the game, and it's just like, damn, like, Kefka's like an intimidating villain because he actually did something. Sephiroth didn't do anything until the end of the game, and then when he did, it was really ridiculous. He destroys all these planets like 19 times or whatever. So like, I don't even know if how that makes sense. But you know, like, nothing really happened until the end of the game, and that just sucks. I was like super expecting something big to happen, you know, or Sephiroth to beat this like really reoccurring villain or something. And he's there like a lot of the time, but a lot of the game is just like backstory, man, and like all this shit I don't even care about, you know? It's like Cloud's backstory in his hometown and stuff, and like you find out some shit about Cloud later that just is like, it's like a weird revelation and stuff, and like I thought it was kind of cool, but it just seems like it comes out of nowhere, you know? And this is like way late into the game when the story actually like gets even mildly interesting. Like before then, it's just like, okay, we're going to this next place because this thing, we're chasing Sephiroth. That's literally the whole game is, oh, we're chasing after Sephiroth. Like that can be done well. Like Dolmegus in Dolmegus in Dragon Quest VIII is an intimidating villain because he killed Master Rylus and he turned the two of the main characters into the toad, or the troll looking guy, the king, and the horse who's the princess. And so, you know, he did that, and so now you have a personal stake in it to go and find Dolmegus to get them transformed back. Well, it's not always very clear in this game why you're tracking down Sephiroth. Well, to stop him from, you know, destroying the world or whatever. Like, okay, that's such a generic plot. It's like, oh, we're gonna destroy the world. And I know there's some kind of message of like environmentalism and stuff in here, but like even that's a very like played out and tired plot at this point. Like, what, you fucking Avatar? Not like the Last Airbender, but like the blue people. This is the one time when I'm actually talking about Avatar, and I'm talking about that Avatar, not Avatar the Last Airbender. Like, come on, like some environmental message. I don't know, maybe it was cool back in the 90s or whatever, but like I don't give a shit about that anymore. Like, it's really disappointing that there's just really not that interesting of a story going on, you know, to me anyway, because I was kind of expecting a lot, honestly. I wasn't expecting a lot, but I was also expecting a lot because of all the hype, you know. That was kind of one of the things, and like everyone, I remember one of my friends, like, when I told him I wasn't invested in the story back in the day, like on the PSP when I was playing on there, and he's like, you know, like, he's like shocked that I wasn't invested in this fucking story, and I'm just like, I don't know, it just wasn't that interesting, like, you know, it has some moments that are pretty cool, you know, but if even if the story wasn't that great, if the characters were better, then like that could be maybe forgiven a little bit, because like I wouldn't say like Final Fantasy VI has like the greatest story ever or anything, but it's got like a pretty good story, but it's mostly a great story because of the characters that are telling this story, you know, that are there experiencing this story. And in this game, literally every piece of dialogue, as far as like I can remember, is just exposition, which is like what you don't want to do. You know, like, oh, we gotta go find Sephiroth. Oh, I did this thing in my past. Oh, you know, this and that. And it's like, there was no like really introspective moments about things happening or any of that. I'm kind of aware that there, like, later on when you get the airship and whatever, you can kind of talk to your party there, and they say little extra things, and I kind of skipped over some of that. So I mean, you know, maybe that was what I was kind of looking for with some of those more moments of calm where we just kind of sit there and talk about how they felt for a second about what just happened. And the one big good version of that, you know, where there was like a kind of a good character moment, or like a good, like we had a good emotional moment with the characters, that is, was when Aerith died, and then everyone's just sitting there and they all have their own little reaction, and then like some of them are crying and some of them are just like really broken up about it, and Cloud's all broken up about it. I'm like, this is cool, this is great. You know, when that disc ended, I said to myself, you know, like, if the second disc is like just them like that's our motivator now. That can be our motivator, is to go and kill Sephiroth because he killed Aerith, who's the best character in the whole game, and I'll get to that in a second. But and that can be the motivator for the story going forth. And it really wasn't. They mention it a few times, but that's what I wanted it to be, because then it would have been kind of a personal stake in this, you know? And they kind of mentioned that near the end. It's like everyone's got their own little personal thing that they're kind of fighting for or whatever, but it's just like, I just felt like that should have been a bigger part of the story after that. It's because that was such a big event, and and storyline wise, actually, like the little bit of story they actually had there, Eris was an important thing to defeating Sephiroth. There, I'm not gonna, I don't want to spoil like everything like that, but it's just in case you get something different out of the story, if you go and play the game, but that if you haven't, already or whatever, um, but yeah, so it's kind of like it's just it felt like a missed opportunity to me that they didn't like ruminate on that more and just like have some more moments about that, especially with how attached anyway I got Cloud to be attached to Eris, I went for all the options because I mean out of the girl, and we had this conversation one time too, and I'm not just being vain and shallow here by saying this, but I do think Eris is the most beautiful of the girls. Everyone loves Tifa because of her big tits or whatever. And Tifa's actually a pretty decent character as well. She's maybe one of the other best characters, and I definitely grew a little bit attached to her because she was in my party the whole time. I like Yuffie too. She's just kind of like she brazen and bold personality, like really sort of childish sometimes, but I liked her. She's cool too. But Eris was always my favorite, even before playing the game. I always thought she was the most beautiful and, like damn, she's fine, like Eris is awesome, but it's not just that even. Like her character is a good character. Like they actually have moments where her and Cloud like do stuff that isn't related to the plot, like they go to an amusement park at one point and it's just like they're just hanging out and it's like I like that shit. The dialogue's not always the most crazy thing or whatever, but like damn, like she actually kind of got some development that wasn't just like we're going to fight Sephiroth, which is like every other person's character. Hey, in the game, that's like literally what everyone else is like after the whole time. But I don't know. So that was just kind of a little thing for me. Is like all the characters. I mean, it's not a little thing. It's a big thing. All of the characters fucking are not really that great. They're not very well developed. I get what they're after, but they don't really do a good job at like endearing me to these characters outside of like Eris and Tifa and stuff. Like, so yeah. So that was kind of disappointing. Because I just had expected a lot more of the characters after Final Fantasy VI. And I get that they put a lot more of their effort in this game into the gameplay and into the graphics and into the soundtrack and all of that kind of stuff. Because that's the more impressive stuff. That's why this game was impressive back in the day, is because this was our first, like, real 3D, like, RPG. And that blew people's minds back then. I get that. I understand that. And that's something about me, is I can see games from the lens of back then, because I was around back then playing these PlayStation games. I understand kind of, I can look, like I said, I can look at the graphics of this game and not be like, oh, they don't look like PS4 graphics. Of course they don't look like PS4 graphics. They're the PS1 era, but they're very impressive for the PS1 era. And maybe even the best looking game on the system. Maybe. I don't know. That's a hard thing to say, but like, damn, some of the pre-rendered backgrounds look just fucking awesome. And just, they're really aided by the camera angles, like I said earlier. But, I understand that they were more focused on all of that stuff, and especially after putting so much effort into that on Final Fantasy VI, into the characters and the story and whatnot. Maybe they were just trying to take it more lax and just kind of do a more simple plot about saving the world or whatever, with some, like, heavy environmentalism stuff in there, and like, and I know that like Eris is based off of like that guy's mom who Sakaguchi, I think, right, his mom or something, like she died or something at the time, and he was kind of putting that into the Eris character, and I think that adds the Eris character. I think that's why the character is such a good character, is because there's real life experience put into that, but like the other characters just talk about what's going on in the game, and it's like that's fine, but you want to make your characters three-dimensional, Ironically enough, they're not very three-dimensional. They're more 2D. Whereas in Final Fantasy VI, the characters are three-dimensional, even though they're 2D sprites, which is just kind of that's pretty hilarious. Actually, that's actually hilarious. I never thought about it like that. That's pretty funny. Anyway, so that's kind of cool. But yeah, so like just there's not. It's like what was I gonna say? So yeah, like I don't know, just the story for me at least just doesn't hold up, and the translation is really bad apparently too. Like, and I could see that. Like, there's some lines that just don't make any fucking sense. Like, I don't really understand what was going on in the whole like when you're in the on the Ferris wheel or whatever with Eris. Like, they're just talking about they're babbling nonsense as far as I'm concerned. Like, I thought it was gonna be some plot stuff, but like I don't know, something about that's weird. It's still a great scene, but it's like at some point in that conversation, I just remember thinking, what am I reading here? Am I just not understanding this or what? And that could be part of it. Maybe I just didn't understand the story or whatever. I'm definitely going to look into a lot of that after the fact. But what I like to do is I like to do an unfiltered, like I haven't seen any reviews or anything yet. I mean, I have like a long time ago, but I don't want any of that to taint my opinion of the game. And just because somebody else explains the story to me and the game didn't explain the story to me, like, that's so if it didn't mean anything to me then, that's what I want coming across as my opinion, because that's my opinion, and if my opinion changes later, great, maybe you'll hear about that in a different video later on. I'm not going to do another review or anything, but if I ever have to come back and talk about this game for some reason again in some other video, or maybe a future Final Fantasy game or something. But yeah, so I don't know, like, that might be like all I have to say about the fucking game. But it's just like, at the end of the day, the game is just kind of a little bit disappointing in that regard, it's just I wasn't really expecting a whole lot, but I knew the game was like really beloved and really good to a lot of people, so I was just kind of expecting a lot more than we kind of got. I didn't really talk about the dungeon design. Like, most of the dungeon design is pretty cool. Very cinematic, but also designed well. There's some like puzzles and stuff that are pretty decent. Sometimes, very very rarely there's puzzles, but there are sometimes. Like the towns and stuff. There's actually like pretty cool towns that kind of stand out. That's kind of my problem with Final Fantasy VI, wasn't the towns didn't always really stand out quite as much. But the towns here are definitely all kind of unique, and I thought that was really cool. There's a lot of little extra stuff that I didn't do, like the chocobo racing and whatnot, but like, you have to do that during the story once, but that's the only time I ever like kind of did it. Was just to do that for the story. But I just feel like at a certain point, there were points in the game where I wasn't very invested in what I was doing, and I was just kind of bored of it, and I just kind of wanted to get to the next thing, and because it's mostly, I think, because the story wasn't really kind of holding me along or whatever. Like, gameplay wise, like, what the fuck even is this? Oh. Okay, so, yeah, like, gameplay-wise, like I said, I was generally, like, pretty into it, but, like, it just, it didn't always hit the way I kind of wanted it to, so, I don't know, we'll play that one. I just want to get through a lot of this music, because I don't know how much more I have to say about the game. I thought the overworld was pretty well laid out too. I didn't really remember it being. Well, I never got to like the full overworld later on in the game when I played it originally, but I got onto the overworld initially, so it was really cool. It's kind of a nice subversion that you kind of leave Midgar, because the whole like first part of the game is like you're trying to destroy these reactors or whatever. To save the planet, but then the story kind of, not the story, but it becomes a little bit more than that. Like, you're going and doing more than that, so that's cool. Sorry, I just really like listening to the music. The music's really good. Like it's so serene and calming and whatnot. Like you get that. Like that's good shit right there. Um, let's see if I can find some of the other ones that I've been listening to. There's this like one part where, and I think you can do this like at other times too, but like there's one part where you it's at this the fort or whatever, where there's like it's like a tactical gameplay almost, which is just like really crazy. But there's like a part in the game where near the end where you actually kind of have to do this thing. But yeah, so that was kind of fun. But here, we'll play the more emotional tracks so we can kind of get to that. But anyway, so yeah, so that was cool how they kind of, like I said, they kind of switch things up every now and again, but also there was just a lot of those that was just kind of random. Like every now and again you just be like, okay, I guess I gotta learn this thing now. Or I didn't do this thing at the right specific moment, like some quick time event or something, and you're just like, guess I fucking fucked that up or whatever. Didn't jump on this certain platform at the right time or whatever. So yeah, that's a thing. Oh, there's some pretty cool stuff. I think the late game has like most of the like really cool boss fights, and like I think these should have been spread out better, like maybe like mid to late game, like if they would have put a few more of those there. Like there was just a point like near the end of the game where it was just like boss fight of like all these important things. One of them was like this thing called weapon. And apparently there's multiples of those. I didn't fight the other ones because the guide said, oh, it's really hard, don't fight it unless you're like level 99 or some shit. I'm like, alright, I guess I just won't fight that one then. But it's like this like kaiju thing like that you fight. It wasn't really that hard of a fight or whatever, but it's just like it's cool and cinematic in that sense. It's intimidating, even though it was a pretty easy fight. But like I just thought it was cool how they put big things like this in scale. And you know, there's like secrets in this game too. I'm just going all over the place at this point, but I was just thinking like you don't actually like meet Yuffie in the story. You just gotta have to like find her randomly in like a forest or whatever. And I think she just kind of randomly shows up in a forest, and you have to like do all this stuff to like recruit her. There's like this guy Vincent Valentine or some shit. I didn't get him. I didn't know how to get him in the mansion or whatever. I never figured that out. So, and by that point I was just like, well, I'm probably not going to use him that much anyway, so I'm just whatever. I'll just not get him, you know, like. So there's that. Yeah, I don't know. Like, other than that, it's like it's just like a bunch of shit I didn't do. You know, like a bunch of extra shit, but you don't have to do most of that stuff. So there's like a whole section in this fucking guide about chocobo racing and whatnot. Yeah, apparently, like I said, there's like Ultima weapons or whatever. I didn't fucking get that shit. Actually, that was what fucking got my friend to stop playing the game right at the end of the game, so I kind of was a little weary on doing that anyway, because I just really didn't want to. Like, I didn't need to do that, you know? Like, I can be fine with the weapons I already have. Like, the interesting thing about, like, that's an interesting thing, actually, is that the weapons and stuff, they kind of come slowly where you get new stuff, and it's interesting because you don't necessarily have like armor and helmets and stuff like in other games, you know, like you kind of equip yourself with a bunch of different stuff, but it's just like literally you get your sword or whatever weapon that character is using, and then you get an accessory, and you get like the fuck is the other thing? I don't know. You get like an accessory, and I'm trying to think what the other thing was, but I don't know. Maybe it was like an armor. It's like really limited in a sense, or whatnot. So it's kind of cool how you're not always looking for like a bunch of different armor sets, and like, you know, you're looking for this specific helmet or some shit. You know, like it's all this random crap that you could be out there searching for, but you just kind of cut it down to the basic shit, and I respect that, you know. I respect that that's a thing that they did Um, just kind of cutting everything down to cutting the fat in a sense. I think that's cool. But at the end of the day, like, the game is a good game, but it's not a great story, which was disappointing to me after having played the last game. And that's what I think was the biggest downfall of the game for me. It's just that I wasn't invested in what was happening. Thus, when we were just kind of going from place to place to place, I wasn't always 100% on... Oh, by the way, there was a snowboarding fucking mini game. What was the point of that? That was stupid as shit. I'm not playing Sonic Adventure fucking here. Like, come on. Snowboarding mini game? That was a dumb one. Honestly, I didn't like that one. Part after that was kind of cool, where you can, like, this is like big, expansive area. There's like all these caves and whatever. And you actually end up freezing at one point, and then you like end up in this guy's hut or whatever. That was kind of cool. Anyway, so that stuff was just disappointing, that I wasn't always really invested in why we were doing the things we were doing. More so, I was just invested in doing those things because it was fun to do. But that only gets you so far, and that's why I feel at some points I definitely felt some burnout trying to go through the game. And I didn't play this game in like super long spurts. It was like 4 or 5 hours a night for the past few weeks now. But it's just that was what was disappointing to me, was just that the story and the characters didn't hold up quite like I was sort of expecting them to, because there's so much love for the characters and whatnot, and such a big thing. And maybe that gets expanded upon in kind of the other media and stuff. And I'm not playing fucking Crisis Core because it's a whole big thing about that, and I'll never buy that game again because I just don't. I fucking hate what happened to my original copy and my original PSP with it in it and stuff. And I don't blame my friend for that shit anymore. I mean, I do. I think it's funny now, obviously, but it's just like, I just have a grudge against the game now because of what happened to it, Like, I don't think I'm very interested in playing that. And I'm not very interested in the characters and stuff of this game, outside of Tifa and Aeris and whatnot, who's dead. That was the other thing. Okay, so while the music is playing, it's appropriate time to talk about this. But Aeris dying felt really forced to me. It just felt odd because it felt like they took their best character, and it didn't feel earned, really, that they, like, just killed her off or whatever. They set it up earlier on, and that was cool and whatever, and I already, like, obviously knew that going in. That was another thing. I didn't get, I got spoiled on that, obviously. Everyone knows that, so it's like, there's no surprise there anymore. So playing it for the first time and not having that surprise sucks, Like, maybe that blew people's minds back then, too, a twist like that. I don't know. A lot of the twists in the game just felt like they were kind of trying to, oh, look, what are we going to do? Oh, here's a twist. Here's a twist, like, it's like, they weren't very well earned or whatever. I think that they ended up doing okay with it by the end, but I was just expecting so much more out of that, I was wanting to get to that scene because I wanted the context of that, I wanted to understand why that was such an emotional scene. And the only reason I even got kind of choked up about it was because of the music. And only just a little bit. I actually like I'm gonna add a fucking tear on some of the shit in Final Fantasy VI, like the opera scene, and there's a certain part with Celeste, if you know what I'm talking about, like in the second half of the game, that was definitely pretty fucking emotional or whatever. But like, Jesus Christ, like this game did not have that kind of stuff, and like the only even twinge of that was the Aeris dying thing, and that was only because I liked her so much, and she's just like, she'd be my favorite character out of this game. That's not saying a whole lot because the characters aren't that great in this game, and even she is just, she's a pretty good character, not like a, oh wow, this is an amazing character kind of thing. there's so much missed potential there. I didn't feel like the context like helped my understanding or enjoyment of it at all, because there wasn't much context to be had. The story is so lackluster that it's like that just happens at one point, you know. It just kind of comes out of nowhere, and it's like, all right, well, it's cool. She's dead now, and you know, we grieve over her for a second. And I think that's cool and that's great, and whatever. But like, you know, just like whatever. So, just thought that was a little underplayed and could have been so much better. Maybe it's just my fault for being spoiled. But guess what? It's not my fault. It's the internet's fault for spoiling me. Like, seriously, there's no way you can avoid that spoiler these days. That's, like, probably one of the most well-known video game spoilers or whatever. So, that kind of sucks, you know? It just sucks that nobody's going to be able to ever experience this game in 100% non-spoiler, you know, esque, unless you get, like, a total non-gamer to play it, which, like, whatever, like, that might be interesting, but I'm not interested in, you know, ever getting somebody to play this game. I like, not that I wouldn't recommend it, but it's like, you gotta kind of be a hardcore, like, not like hardcore Final Fantasy fan, but like, you gotta be a fan of the other Final Fantasy games, I feel, to really get the most out of this, this game, you know. So, and even then, like, I played all the other Final Fantasy games. I'm not like the hugest fan of them. Like, I love Dragon Quest more, obviously. Out of the Final Fantasy games, though, this and 6 are probably the two best ones that I played so far, and 4 maybe. I didn't even think 4 was like all that great. It was like it was pretty good, you know. Like, that's pretty much the Final Fantasy moniker. Like, we're pretty good, you know. Like, 1 and 2 was probably obviously the weakest one, but 3 was pretty good. I remember liking 3. But like, none of these games even like come close to like some of the like weaker Dragon Quest games. Like, okay, most of them are probably better than Dragon Quest 6, but like, are they really better than like Dragon Quest 7 or something, which is probably one of the other weaker ones? Not because it's bad. I mean, it's just really long is the real problem with that one. But like, I like Dragon Quest 7, but you know, the age-old debate: what's the better game, Dragon Quest 7 or Final Fantasy 7? I don't know. Like, which one would I replay again? Would be Dragon Quest 7, and I'm definitely gonna do that at some point because I need to replay the remake of Dragon Quest 7. And you know what? I'm actually kind of open to... I'm open to it, but at the same time, I'm really reluctant to want to play the Final Fantasy VII remake as well, because I want to see maybe they've kind of finally got back around to what they were intending to do in the original game or whatever. So I may give it a shot at some point. We'll see, kind of, once it's all out in 7 years or whatever, how I'm still feeling about that. And maybe by then it'll be a fresh enough thing that I'll want to play it. I'm definitely interested in that. The only thing that's turning me off about that is the gameplay aspects to it. I've heard it's like not as... It doesn't really feel like the old game, you know, like this one. And if you'll remember, that's the thing I liked most about this game was the gameplay. And definitely like the materia system and that kind of stuff. It was like all the best parts of the game were in the gameplay. The story is just so weak that it's like, but they have a chance to redeem themselves. They could definitely bring it around to making the story like really mean something, you know, like develop your characters more and whatnot. You've got more time to do that in this big epic like PS4 version of the Final Fantasy VII or whatever, you know. So definitely interested in that and seeing where that goes. So I don't know, like, that's kind of about what I have to say about the game. You know, and bearing that all in mind, that I'm just kind of, I really like the gameplay, but I'm just disappointed by the characters and the 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 storyline is just kind of weak in my opinion. So I feel like, you know, and I know that's probably like I said earlier, like a lot of people are gonna fucking hate me for that, but it's like that's just what I feel was the the weakest aspects of the game were that shit. And everything else was pretty good. Thus, what I'm gonna give Final Fantasy VII is it's tough. It's really tough. Do I want to? And I know people are gonna be mad at me, but yeah, well, fuck. I'm debating. I'm somewhere between a high 7 and an 8. I don't know if I can just give it a flat out 8. I want to, and this music is definitely helping my opinion to doing that because that final boss was really epic. But the storyline and the characters are just so weak, man. It's like I don't think I can give it an 8. I think I gotta give it like a 7. Here, this will be a good score for it because it's Final Fantasy 7. I'm gonna give it a 7.7 out of 10. And out of 10, haha, let's laugh about that again because, you know, it's funny. I always say out of 10 or whatever. I think it's funny anyway. I'm gonna give it a 7.7 out of 10. I think that's a fair score. That's like right where I wanted to be with the game. It's so close to being an 8 for me. It's not a 9 or a 10 for me. It would never get to that high, but it's so close to being an 8 for me. But it's just dragged down by not having the most interesting stuff going on, and I'm just not always so super invested in getting through it and that kind of stuff. And you kind of never know what to expect with it. At least with Final Fantasy VI, you sort of know what to expect, and then you get surprised, you know, because there's something new, and it's like, oh man, we're going to this new interesting place, and there's going to be like a fucking dragon there or some shit that we have to fight or whatnot, you know, like, this is crazy, man, like, fuck, there's like, what, like the 8 dragons in the world or whatever, there's probably way more than that, I don't remember, I didn't kill them all, or 7 or 6 dragons or some shit like that, like, that's cool, that's fantasy, that's interesting, to me, but I think that was the other big thing, is the atmosphere was cool, and the world was, you know, it wasn't as cool as I wanted it to be. It didn't really stand out as much, but there were definitely some cool areas, and they definitely tried to theme the towns and stuff well. But overall, the more technology-based stuff that they've been adding to the Final Fantasy series since this game is really a problem for me. I'm not as invested in that side of things. I'm invested in the magic and that stuff, and that's why I think Final Fantasy VI is so brilliant, is because the idea is magic is dead, and then you have these special characters who are bringing it back, you know, and that's neat, above the technology, and they're using the magic, and it's really powerful because the theming of the game is there's technology, but the magic is just so much better, you know what I mean? But in this game, it doesn't really feel like that. It feels like the technology is surpassing the magic and whatnot. And I guess that's kind of one of the themes of the game, is that the magic kind of takes over again. But I think that theme was done much better in Final Fantasy VI, is all I'm saying. But which is basically the whole game, is Final Fantasy VI did it better. Although I will give Final Fantasy VII the slight gameplay edge in terms of, you know, it had the better, with the materia system and all of that. So I think it gets the edge on gameplay, but story and character-wise, like, fuck no. It's, like, not even on anywhere near the level of Final Fantasy VI. So, yeah, like, that's about what I have to say about it, I think. It's just that. So, I don't know. Like, I've been looking forward to playing this game for a long time, just to kind of make my own opinion on it, and I ended up being, you know, sort of disappointed by it, but also there were some good things to it. Also, another thing that I noticed, I just want to throw this in there right before I end it, because I noticed that there were some linear bits in this game that a certain other fucking Final Fantasy game kind of stole from Final Fantasy 13. Now, it's not that bad. Like, this game didn't just have, like, linear hallways. There was branching paths all the time and this and that. But sometimes there were some hallways where I kind of just thought, like, man, feel like I'm playing Final Fantasy 13 right now. So if anything, Final Fantasy took the worst parts of this game and amplified them. The story for sure in Final Fantasy 13, but and the linearness of some of the areas in Final Fantasy 7. It took those worst elements and put them into itself. So yeah, I just thought that was kind of funny. There's little bits that kind of reminded me of Final Fantasy 13, and I'm just like, man, that's like the worst game I've ever played. But this isn't the worst game I've ever played. It's a pretty good game. You know what? It's a great game, not a great story and characters and whatnot, which is kind of what I come to an RPG for. And I'm not really in love with the setting. It's too technology for me, you know, so that's why I'm kind of looking forward to Final Fantasy 9. I'm hoping beyond fucking hope that game is going to be as good as I've heard it is, and that's going to be like the real best Final Fantasy game outside of maybe 6. I'll probably always still like 6 better. That's probably always going to be the best one, but like I'm hoping beyond hope that Final Fantasy 9 is actually better than Final Fantasy 7, and I think it has a fair chance at being. You know, there's no game between Final Fantasy 9 and 7. You can't count. Don't tell me otherwise. But anyways, so I'm not playing Final Fantasy 8, by the way. Sorry. I've just heard terrible things, and I'm not really. I don't really want to look forward to that. I know it's got that card game or whatever, and I remember that from back in the day. Oh, okay. One thing I want to mention, and we'll go out on a high note here. So, and I'd be interested. I'll have to tell my brother about this later because I just had this really vivid memory of this, and so you know, like everyone's probably really nostalgic about the music in this game, right? And I had this memory. I thought back about like at some point. I think it was just like I knew like the Aerith theme. I think even then I knew that Aerith died or something like way back in the day. Like fuck, like this is the oldest video game spoiler ever or whatever the fuck. Like everyone knew it, you know, like the most well-known one. But anyway, so the point is, I remember this one time we were going on this like long road trip. I think my brother or like one of my cousins was driving or something. I think we were going to my grandparents' place, and that's like 4 hours from here. My brother gave me, I don't know how, I think it was on a CD or something, but he gave me the Final Fantasy soundtrack to listen to. Maybe it was on an iPod. I don't know. Maybe it was that late in the game. I don't think it was. I think this is a long time ago. I have just this like faint memory of this. But he gave this to me to listen to, the Final Fantasy VII soundtrack or whatever. So I remember hearing this back then. And I remember that, like, so that got ingrained into my head, you know, the soundtrack back then. So I have like a slight nostalgic connection to it. My brother used to play this game all the time. I kind of remember it from back then. I actually remember the time. I remember a time where he was playing the train sequence that's not the one at the beginning, like kind of near the end where you're like I think it's called the runaway train or something in the guide, but it's like later on in the game. It's like late game, but I remember him playing that segment. Like I don't know why I remember that, but I remember that for some reason. I remember like, you know, I remember a lot of stuff that my brother was playing back then, like Silent Hill and Resident Evil and shit. I remember watching him play those, and those were always fucking scary as shit. Just Silent Hill. Maybe that's why it's like so scary to me now. The first Silent Hill is just because like, man, I was fucking freaked out by that game back then, and they'd always be like, "Don't watch this," and I'd be like, "I want to watch though. It's amazing. Like I want to see this, even though I'm super scared and shit." I used to pretend like I was like asleep in the same, because we had the same room, so I used to pretend I was asleep and like be like looking over and watching like while they were playing and shit. It's pretty funny. But same with Metal Gear Solid. Like I always wanted to watch him play that, but like no, I never really got to see much of that. It was really me just experiencing that game for myself mostly. But I just remember that Final Fantasy VII, like listening to the soundtrack back then randomly one time, and that was cool. You know, like. I remember really liking it back then, so it's just neat. It's just a neat little memory. That's like probably my oldest memory with Final Fantasy VII is that. So, but anyway, I don't know. That's the end of the video. I don't have anything else to say about Final Fantasy VII. I think the soundtrack's ready to end anyway. Yep, literally in 10 seconds. So, yeah. That's my review of Final Fantasy VII. It's a disappointing game. It's the worst game of all time. No, I'm just kidding. It's an alright game. It's good, great game. Terrible story. See you later, JZNES saying keep classics, stick around for more reviews, underrated games, and I'll see you guys in the next one. JZ